Number 8. Old rich man vs. young hot wife. 77-year-old Kazuki Nasaki was a pretty controversial figure. He was known for being a self-made millionaire in Japan who only desired beautiful women that were much younger than him and nothing else. He even published an autobiography called The Man Who Gave 3 billion yen to 4,000 Beautiful Women. At one point in Kazuki's autobiography, he talked about a model that helped him up after he tripped at Haneda Airport. That woman was 25-year-old Saki Sudo, who ended up marrying Kazuki after he offered her 1 million yen for marriage. Saki Sudo had always been obsessed with money ever since she was in high school. Her classmates reported that she always had the most expensive high-end bags and clothes. She was able to purchase these expensive accessories by working as a prostitute during the night. Although they were married, Saki was barely ever with Kazuki in Wakayama and preferred to spend most of her time at her apartment in Tokyo. She traveled all around the world from Bali to Italy using the money that Kazuki would give her every month. On May 24, 2018, just a few months after he got married to Saki Sudo, Kazuki Nasaki was found dead in his own home around 9 p.m. The only other people that were at his house was Saki and one of Kazuki's housekeepers, who has been working for him for over 30 years. Kazuki's cause of death was acute poisoning from a lethal amount of stimulant drugs. However, he never actually took any stimulant drugs, so there was no way that he did this to himself. According to Saki, Kazuki went upstairs to the bedroom after eating dinner together. She went to check up on him around 8 p.m. once their housekeeper came home and asked her to. The police declared his death to be a homicide and started investigating right away. They questioned Saki and the housekeeper. When they checked the security cameras of his residence, they found that no one had entered or left the house. The housekeeper came inside the residence only after Kazuki had already died. So, the only person that was near him was his own wife, Saki. The police didn't have enough evidence to arrest Saki right away, but soon they found out that Saki had actually been researching the very drug that killed Kazuki. She literally looked up how to kill someone. Detectives also discovered messages with a drug dealer who gave her the drug to kill Kazuki. Saki tried to escape, but authorities caught her just in time. Saki Sudo was arrested and charged with the murder of Nozaki Kazuki and for violating the stimulant drug control law. She is currently awaiting her trial. Number 7. Eye Drop Dead. On January 16, 2020, a South Carolina nurse was arrested for poisoning her husband by putting eye drops into his water for 3 days. 64-year-old Stephen Clayton died in July of 2018 in their house near Lake Wylie. The wife had also hit his phone, so Stephen couldn't call anyone for help either. 53-year-old Lana Sue Clayton said that she never meant to kill her husband. She just wanted to make him uncomfortable. However, prosecutors didn't buy her story at all. They believe she intentionally killed her husband so she could inherit all his money. Stephen Clayton was a successful businessman worth millions, and he lived in a massive and fancy house. Initially, everyone thought that Stephen actually died from a fall. However, a toxicology report said otherwise. It showed extremely high levels of tetrahydrozoline, an ingredient found in eye drops. Lana tried to make herself seem like the victim by saying she's been abused by her husband since they got married, but prosecutors ended up dismissing all of her claims. Judge Paul Birch said that the case was one of the weirdest ones he's ever seen. He's also said that if Lana was actually being abused, she could have just left her husband and informed the authorities instead of straight up killing him. Apparently, Lana had actually destroyed her husband's will right after she killed him so that she would be the one to get all his money. Lana Sue Clayton ended up getting charged with manslaughter and sentenced to 25 years in prison. It'd be murder. Number 6. Roach Killer. On January 12, 2021, 70-year-old Sancha Tenerva poisoned her husband's coffee with a roach killer. The incident took place in Queens, New York. It was also caught by surveillance camera. Sancha was seen adding a powdery substance to her husband's coffee. Later on, it was discovered that the ant and roach killer allegedly contained 100% boric acid. According to the Queens District Attorney, Sancha had put the insecticide into her husband's drink on multiple occasions, so this wasn't the first time she did something like this. According to Tenerva, she did this in order to teach him a lesson. Once 63-year-old Robert Barron saw the footage, he immediately went to the nearest police station to report his wife. According to police, Robert said that he noticed his food tasting weird and that he usually felt awful after his meals. He also reported that he was feeling more tired than normally and would sleep for over 15 hours at a time. Because of this, Robert started getting suspicious of his wife, so he decided to install some cameras into their kitchen, which is how he ended up catching his wife pouring boric acid into all his drinks and food. Boric acid is usually used to kill pests and insects, but when consumed by humans, it can cause nausea, diarrhea, or even death. Sancha Tenerva was charged with attempted assault and could face up to 4 years in prison for her crimes. Number 5. You talk too much. On December 7, 2021, 54-year-old Alvis Parrish poisoned her boyfriend by putting Seroquel in his lemonade in order to shut him up. She had been living with her boyfriend, William Carter, for over 9 years. According to Parrish, she gave him just enough of the drug to make him stop talking, but still keep him alive. She actually ended up calling the authorities so he wouldn't die and confessed to everything. The deputy that arrested Parrish said that she was talking in a slur and seemed intoxicated. The same officer said that Carter seemed extremely lethargic when he got to the scene. According to Carter, he thought the lemonade tasted kind of weird, but never thought his long-term girlfriend had tried to poison him. Carter didn't actually want to go to the hospital at first, but ended up needing to go to the emergency room after he collapsed on the floor. Alvis Parrish faces charges of poisoning food and water with the intent of injuring or murdering someone and is currently being held on a $50,000 bond. Do you think this couple will stay together after this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 4. Benadril Murder. In March 2018, Larry Eisenberg was found dead in Lake Coeur d'Alene in North Idaho, and his wife, 66-year-old Lori Eisenberg, has been accused of poisoning her own husband to death and then throwing his body in the river. According to Lori, her husband fell off the boat while he was trying to fix the motor. Everyone just thought Larry had drowned. However, the autopsy said otherwise. The report revealed that Larry had actually died from a lethal amount of Benadryl, and he actually showed no signs of drowning at all. Before Lori murdered Larry, they actually went to the river where she checked the water depth, tides, waves, and currents. Right after Larry died, she sent herself, her sister, and her daughters all the money from their joint account. Lori and Larry seemingly had the perfect marriage, according to everyone around them. Larry's son said that they were absolute soulmates and that he fully trusted her. This wasn't the only crime Lori ever committed, though. She had actually been stealing money from the place where she worked, a nonprofit organization that was helping low-income families. She embezzled over $500,000, but she was too scared of her husband finding out and divorcing her, so she decided to kill him instead. In court, she said, "I was an emotional and physical wreck. That day on the lake, I was not thinking very well. I do not remember details. It was a blur of shock and horror and confusion." But the judge and jury didn't give a crap, and Lori Eisenberg was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of her husband. Number 3. Heart condition. Stacy Hunsucker has been married to her husband Joshua for 8 years. The couple shared 2 beautiful daughters and had a pretty decent life, aside from Stacy having a major heart condition. She had to use a pacemaker to keep her heart rate stable all the time. Apart from that, she was a perfectly healthy woman until one day in September 2019 when she died of an apparent heart attack. Her husband Joshua was the one to call it in, saying that he was working on his laptop, turned around to see Stacy slumped on the couch without a pulse. While her death made sense because of her heart condition, lots of red flags began popping up. The first one was that even though Stacy was an organ donor, Joshua ended up refusing on her behalf and said that he didn't want her body to be all cut up. He ended up getting her body cremated within hours of her death, and before anyone else could step in or do anything. Joshua also collected a $250,000 payout from the life insurance that was in Stacy's name. Days later, he started dating someone from his office. He never displayed any signs of grief. But it was when a private company, where Stacy signed up to be an organ donor, revealed something strange in her blood samples that things really took a turn. Stacy's blood had toxic amounts of tetrahydrozoline, a chemical that can be found in eye drops. Authorities believe that Joshua had slowly been poisoning his wife by putting the drops in her water. Joshua was arrested 3 months after Stacy's death and is still awaiting trial, and Stacy's cause of death has been updated from being a heart attack to a homicide. Number 2. Man poisons wife's ice cream. On June 25, 2018, 64-year-old Peggy Pettis passed away suddenly after having a bowl of ice cream. Her husband, David Petty, called 911 and told them that his wife had fainted and that she was blue and not breathing. When the paramedics arrived, they pronounced her dead on the scene. David claimed that he had been napping, and when he woke up, Peggy was already the way he found her. He also told the paramedics that he was shocked because she had recently been to the doctors for a complete health checkup, and they gave her the okay. As the investigators were going through all of the medication in their home, they found hydrocodone and trazodone, both of which were later found in Peggy's system in lethal amounts. After the discovery, David told the detectives that Peggy used to take hydrocodone pills for pain management, but since she had a hard time swallowing pills, she'd grind them up and sprinkle them on top of ice cream and follow them with an alcoholic drink. Sounds like a good idea. Not. The toxicology report confirmed that ice cream, hydrocodone, trazodone, and Benadril were in her system, but there was no alcohol. Upon investigation, it was found that David was the sole benefactor of a life insurance policy that was in Peggy's name that went into effect 3 days before her death. As soon as her death was ruled an accident, he took the payout and thought that he had gotten away with the money, but the law caught up to him. He had sprinkled the medication on top of the ice cream bowl that night and killed his own wife, all for a payout. On January 12, 2022, David was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison for the murder of his wife. And number 1, sleep forever. A man from Michigan was arrested after he repeatedly poisoned his wife's coffee with sleeping pills back in August of 2019. The man was identified as 46-year-old Brian Kozlowski. Apparently, he decided to start adding sleeping pills to her drink after she filed for divorce. Clearly, he didn't want her to leave him. Prosecutors think that he started doing it as revenge. The man's wife, Therese, went to the authorities and told them that she had been feeling extremely tired recently, to the point where she almost fell asleep on the highway. She also said that she felt particularly nauseous after her husband made her coffee. Later on, Therese started getting suspicious of him and decided to put hidden cameras all over their kitchen. Throughout the surveillance camera footage, she found that Brian had been putting something in her drinks. He had been doing it for weeks on end. However, the last time Brian made coffee for her, he added 8 sleeping pills, which could have killed her. Luckily, she didn't drink it. In June of 2018, Brian pled guilty to poisoning his wife. According to his attorney, Brian was feeling profound remorse and was in a dark place when he committed all those crimes. He was later sentenced to 60 weekends in prison, along with 5 years probation. Macomb County Prosecutor Eric Smith was not having it and said the sentence felt like a slap on the face. According to his now ex-wife, Therese Kozlowski, she thinks that Brian's been doing this with the intent to kill her. It was also found that Brian had actually been urinating in Therese's shampoo and conditioner too. Gross.
Number 10. Milan Cyrus's meth problem. Milan Cyrus is a pretty big name in Indonesia. As a trans Instagram celebrity, she was looked up to as a role model in many different communities across the country, and indeed abroad. Her birth name is Muhammad Milandaru Prakasa, but she changed it after undergoing a series of operations. Alas, Milan turned out to be a pretty poor example of a role model. She was busted by the police in Jakarta as part of a drug sting. Local police were tipped off that there was some shady business going on at a hotel in North Jakarta. When they arrived, they found Milan Cyrus in possession of alcohol and crystal meth. Drugs are not something you want to mess with in Indonesia. This was instant jail time, but instead of being put in a women's holding cell, Milan was shoved into a cell with men. All politics aside, it was a pretty poor move on the prison. Regardless of what her birth gender was and what her identity is now, she 100% looks like a woman and has the parts to go along with it. Putting her in a male cell proved instantly problematic, and they ended up having to put her in a special cell by herself to remain neutral. In the end, the whole point is that Milan Cyrus, a role model for many young people dealing with social issues, was doing meth in November 2020 with some shady characters in a greasy hotel room. Number 9. Inappropriate student relations. Stephanie Peterson was supposed to be a role model for her students. She was a middle school teacher in Smyrna Beach who went above and beyond in her work. She also decided to have an inappropriate relationship with one of her students. This was a truly bizarre case. Peterson was 27 years old when she committed the unbelievable act of undressing her 14-year-old student. She was sentenced in 2018 to spend 3 years in prison, then to be put on 2 years of community control, also known as house arrest. Plus, she'll now be registered as a sex offender for the rest of her life. She'll never be able to teach again, at least not in any school in the US. Stephanie ruined her life before she even hit 30, and quite frankly, she isn't anybody's role model anymore. If you're wondering how this could even have happened, let's start from the beginning. Stephanie Peterson and her student became entangled in a romantic relationship on November 1st, 2017. It continued until January 31st, 2018. They communicated through Snapchat, sending inappropriate pictures to one another. Stephanie Peterson would drive to his home at night. The student would sneak out of his parents' house and fool around with her in the driveway. She would also invite him over to her own house, and they sometimes met in a barn behind the student's house. Number 8. Henry Ruggs III. On November 2nd, 2021, Tina Tintor died from thermal injuries. Her death was directly caused by former Las Vegas Raiders player Henry Ruggs III. Henry was a major football star and role model for people everywhere, as most football players are. But just like so many other football players, Henry's personal life was kind of a disaster. He was driving his Corvette at 156 miles per hour when he crashed into Tina's RAV4. It was a dramatic accident that saw Tina's car explode in a fireball. She was trapped inside the vehicle with her dog, while Henry could do nothing but stand and watch as she and her pet burned to death. The coroner determined Tina was literally scorched alive, likely in the most agonizing way possible. She had nothing to do with sports. She was just going for a drive with her dog, and her life was brought to a tragic and unnecessary end by a football player who thought he could do whatever he wanted. Tina had dreams of becoming a computer programmer. She had worked for Target for 2 years before recently acquiring a better job at an insurance company. She was really working hard in life and trying to get ahead, and all that was taken away by Henry Ruggs, whose blood alcohol content was found to be over double the legal limit. Henry was officially charged with 2 counts of driving under the influence, causing death. However, he hasn't been given a sentence yet. He's been sitting on house arrest this whole time, living it up in his mansion. When his trial is finally over, he could be looking at 50 years of prison. Number 7. The perfect role model. An unruly airline passenger who was accused of groping and punching flight attendants had previously won an award for the perfect role model. The bizarre airborne fiasco happened in the summer of 2021 on a Frontier Airlines flight. The plane left Philadelphia at approximately 10:41 p.m. on a Saturday night, bound to land in Miami 2.5 hours later. Maxwell Berry from Ohio just couldn't sit in his seat and mind his own business for a measly 2 hours. Instead, he picked on the female flight attendants, repeatedly groping them as they went by. When one of the male crew members spoke up against his rude behavior, Maxwell punched him in the face. Well, things didn't go great for Maxwell. He had to be taped to his seat and was then arrested by the Miami-Dade Police Department upon landing. He was publicly embarrassed in front of the whole country. The truly ironic part is that, according to the New York Times, he won a College Frat Award for being the perfect role model and for leading the fight to dismantle fraternity stereotypes. Number 6. Aaron Hernandez. just 2 weeks before Aaron Hernandez was arrested for murder. He claimed to be a role model for all Hispanic people. That may have been true when he was playing for the New England Patriots, but after he killed semi-professional football player Odin Lloyd, his status as a role model was promptly revoked. Odin Lloyd was killed on June 17, 2013. He was shot in an industrial park, not more than 1 mile from the house of Aaron Hernandez. On the night before the incident, Hernandez texted 2 of his friends, asking if they could come to Massachusetts. He was saying something about losing trust in someone, and he was obviously quite upset. What his friends didn't realize was that he wanted them to help with a murder. The police investigation revealed that Lloyd and Hernandez had been in contact several hours before the killing and had gotten into some kind of argument over a bag of marijuana. It was also clear that Lloyd had said something Hernandez really didn't like, which threw him into a mad frenzy. He had his 2 friends come up to Massachusetts, and the 3 of them ambushed and executed Lloyd. On April 15, 2015, Hernandez was found guilty of murder. 4 days later, at 3 o'clock in the morning, he was discovered dead in a cell. A star athlete and role model for millions turned murderer and corpse in the blink of an eye. What's the one case of a football star falling from grace that really shocked you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 5. Bad school teacher. Yet another school teacher, someone who was supposed to be looked on as a role model by her students, has gotten into some major trouble. The only good news is that she wasn't messing around with one of her students. Instead, 40-year-old Laura Pollard Ramos of Winter Haven was arrested on March 12, 2021 for theft. What did she steal? It wasn't school supplies and it wasn't lunch money. It was $66,000 from her sick grandmother. Laura was made the power of attorney for her grandmother in 2013. Sadly, her grandma was having difficult times with her health. She trusted Laura to write checks as needed to take care of her. In October of 2020, the family checked in to see how the grandmother was doing financially and found that she had a negative balance in her account. The police investigated and learned that Laura had been gradually draining her account for years. Between November of 2018 and November of 2019, Laura siphoned $66,836, bringing her grandmother's account to a balance of negative $193. This is a woman who was supposed to be teaching kids how to grow into adults, and yet she was stealing from her own family. Definitely not a very good role model. Number 4. Instagram role model's mega fraud. Instagram role model and influencer Kayla Massa was arrested on February 13, 2020. At just 22 years old, Kayla had managed to build herself quite a fan base, with young people all over the country admiring her extravagant lifestyle. Yet, as it turned out, her lifestyle was nothing to admire. She was charged for committing bank and wire fraud, stealing $1.5 million from her followers. People were looking up to this woman, and in return, she was robbing them. Kayla scammed her victims using her Instagram stories. She shared pictures of her bank balance, huge stacks of money, people flashing bank cards, and things like that. Basically, she made it look as though she were super rich. She then made all her followers believe it was easy to make all that money. She said that if anyone following her wanted to make legal money easily, just send her a message. She informed everyone who sent her a message that they could earn $5,000 by doing one thing. They only need to send her their debit card and PIN number. This, of course, was so that she could deposit the cash into their account. She even said that if they weren't comfortable, that they could drain their account first of all the money they had. Kayla said it was all about tax write-offs. Her friend who owned a business would use their card to deposit money, and they would get paid for helping. Nobody got paid for anything except Kayla. She scammed these people and drained their bank accounts. What makes it so much more tragic is that it was mostly her followers 18 years old or younger. It was just young people who looked up to Kayla and wanted to make some money. They were the victims here. Number 3. The fall of an Olympian. Jeff Hugel was a major swimming star, an Olympian who won medals at the 2010 Commonwealth Games. He was a role model to all the young swimmers out there, which made what happened next so tragic. In 2014, after his marriage fell apart, he was arrested for possession of cocaine. After he'd retired from swimming, he'd picked up a bit of a drug habit. Jeff was actually with his ex-wife at the time of his arrest. They were watching the Randwick races in Australia together when they got pulled aside by the police and searched. The cops found cocaine on them, and Jeff's life was upended in an instant. He was publicly shamed, humiliated, and ended up leaving the country. When he did an interview in 2022 to talk about his turbulent past, he admitted to not seeing either of his daughters in 18 months. The possession charge just ruined his life. He had to make a new life for himself in Singapore with a new wife and a new kid. Number 2. Soccer Stars DUI. Abby Wambach was arrested in April of 2016 on a DUI charge. It happened late on a Saturday evening when she was pulled over for failing to stop at a red light. Portland police knew she was drunk right away. She failed the sobriety test and was brought to jail. Although she was polite and cooperative throughout the entire thing, she was still too drunk to be driving. Even once they got her back to the Central Precinct in downtown Portland, she failed the breathalyzer test. Now, many of you may not know who Abby is, so let me tell you. She was once a major women's soccer star. She retired from the US national team after they won the 2015 Women's World Cup. All these years later, she's still the all-time leading soccer player with 184 goals. She was a superstar and a role model for kids everywhere. But as we've already learned today, role models are often undependable. Abby was a great soccer player, but not so good at taking a taxi home instead of driving drunk. Number 1. Role Model Father. In June of 2019, an advisor to the California governor, Gavin Newsom, wrote an essay in which he called himself a role model dad. In the essay, Nathan Ballard wrote, "I believe I was put on earth to be a dad." He went on to talk about just how great he is with his kids and how great a role model he is for all the dads out there. In October of the next year, he was arrested and charged with domestic violence. He tried to suffocate his daughter with a pillow. As it turns out, pretty much anyone can write an essay about anything they want. But this is actually more horrific. According to the Napa County Sheriff's Department, Nathan not only suffocated his 4-year-old daughter, he also pushed his wife into a glass door. From what his wife Mara told the police, he had gotten angry at their daughter and decided to punish her by suffocating the child with a pillow. When Mara saw what he was doing, she went to intervene, and that was when she got shoved into the glass door. Nathan was booked on 2 charges of domestic violence, but released later that day after paying a $75,000 bail.
10. The tragic death of Victoria Strauss. On the night of January 18, 2021, in Columbus, Ohio, Victoria Strauss was killed. The tragic accident involved Victoria, her car, and a pavement kiosk in a parking garage. At just 23 years old, Victoria died from mechanical asphyxiation. It happened when her head got jammed between her vehicle and the payment machine in the parking garage. She was trying to pay for parking when she somehow slipped her head out of her vehicle, wedged it tightly against the machine, and couldn't get it unstuck. Victoria died at 11:37 at night and wasn't found until the next day at 5:40 in the morning. A security guard saw her body stuck between the car and the machine and called the police. When the police did their autopsy, they couldn't find any drugs in her system, but the coroner did note a blood alcohol level of 0.221. So it's not like it was a freak accident, perhaps just more of an intoxicated one. Regardless of if Victoria had been drinking before driving into the parking lot, we know everything that happened thanks to the security footage. As she was trying to pay, she dropped her card on the ground. This may have been because she was drinking, we don't really know. She opened her door to pick her card up and at the same time accidentally accelerated. Her car hit the payment kiosk. Her head got wedged between her open door and the frame, and she stopped moving. 9. Early morning attack in Dublin. Gareth Kelly was stabbed to death at 7 o'clock in the morning as he was trying to start his car. It happened in Dublin, Ireland on Tuesday, February 25, 2020. The aggressor in this situation was Christina Anderson. Christina walked out of her house, leaving her husband and children inside, and approached Gareth calmly and killed him. This was horrible from every front. First of all, Gareth and Christina didn't even know each other. The two had never met in their life. Gareth had no idea what was about to happen to him. He had opened up the hood of his car to look at the engine because his car wouldn't start. He saw Christina coming but didn't know who she was or what she wanted. He may even have thought she was coming to help. But those thoughts left his brain immediately as she plunged the knife into him over and over again. According to the Irish Times, the motivation for Christina's brutal crime was a parking space. Gareth had spent the night at his partner's house in the same area as the apartment complex and had apparently taken the wrong parking space. Christina was allegedly so furious that someone had parked in the wrong spot that she waited until they came back to their car to murder them. Cue the Psycho theme song. She has since been taken into psychiatric care, and all this time later is still waiting to be sentenced for her crime. 8. Brawl at Costco. In a Costco parking lot in Mississauga, Ontario, a brawl erupted over a disagreement. It was a weekend in 2016 and nobody had any idea what COVID was yet. To be quite honest, nobody really knew quite how good they had it at that moment. And yet, a couple of people just couldn't get along, all over a parking spot. The disagreement ended in a ridiculous outburst of anger and fist flying. It all started when a man named Joe Carriero was walking back to his car after getting some great deals at Costco. Why else would anybody go to Costco except for the great deals on 300 rolls of toilet paper? His arms were filled with his bulk purchases when he stopped in his tracks. His car had been blocked by two groups arguing over a parking spot. Naturally, Joe took out his phone and started filming the two parties as they screamed at each other. You know the world loves and hates to see this sort of thing. What began with a lot of yelling and pushing ended with one man having an open cut across his head and the rest of the group being subdued by the Costco employees. Nobody was seriously injured, but considering the video went viral across Canada, pretty sure they were all very embarrassed. Joe handed the video over to the police as evidence, but nobody was ever charged with anything. For Mississauga, it was just another day at Costco. 7. The terrible shooting of Marquise McLaughlin. 28-year-old Marquise McLaughlin was in a parking lot on July 19, 2018. The parking lot was in Clearwater, Florida, a place where the local government still upholds the highly controversial Stand Your Ground law. This law affords citizens the opportunity to defend themselves with deadly force should they feel as if their life is in danger. The issue is that there are different interpretations of danger, and some people say they feel threatened enough to justify a murder. Marquise was shot by a man named Michael Draka in the parking lot. Just before the shooting, Michael had approached Marquise's girlfriend because she had parked in a disabled parking spot and didn't have a placard hanging in her window. We're sure most of us can sympathize with this situation. You see somebody parking in a spot clearly marked for disabled people and you get angry. What if somebody that's actually disabled needs the spot? But things escalated. Marquise got angry back and shoved Michael to the ground as if he was going to beat him up. While lying on his back, Michael drew his handgun and pointed it at Marquise. Marquise was backing away when Michael pulled the trigger and put a bullet in him. Marquise would later die in the hospital from his injuries, and it would turn out that he had been unarmed at the time of the shooting. Michael was not immediately charged for murder. He got away, at first, using the Stand Your Ground law. But after an investigation and a very long trial, he was convicted of manslaughter on August 23, 2019. His sentence was 20 years in prison. Do you think 20 years in prison was too long of a sentence for Michael? Should he have gotten away with murder using the Stand Your Ground law? Let us know your opinions in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. 6. Killed over a parking space. Here we go again. On January 24, 2021, Kiana Singleton was gunned down following a dispute over a parking space. It happened at the M-Bar Sports Grill in Jackson. Her family is desperate for answers, especially considering the circumstances surrounding the shooter. Kiana was killed by Eugenia Funches, a woman who was already out on bond in connection with a different murder in 2019 in Clinton. She had gotten released on a $50,000 bond and was supposed to be home every night before her 10 p.m. curfew. Yet the incident occurred just before 3 o'clock in the morning. Kiana's family is furious that a woman already involved in a murder case was allowed to wander around free and kill their innocent daughter. Kiana was just trying to have a fun night out at a sports grill. As for how the shooting happened in the first place, like I said, it was over a parking space. The two women got into a verbal argument, but then they seemed to go their own separate ways. What Kiana didn't know was that Eugenia was following behind her in a Range Rover. Eugenia pulled up behind Kiana and fired wildly into her vehicle, killing her on the spot. 5. A freak accident. Yet another driver has died in a freak accident while simply trying to park their vehicle. This time it happened at about 9:45 on January 23, 2017. A driver in Brooklyn was trying to park his vehicle, a Toyota Sienna LE, on the side of the road when he got his body stuck between his car door and a tree. How it happened is nothing short of extraordinary. You see, Chen Zeng Len needed to move his vehicle across the street to avoid getting a ticket because he would have been blocking the street sweepers. He got into his vehicle and instead of using his rearview mirror, popped his head out of the door and reversed. It proved to be the last mistake he would ever make. His head got caught between the frame of the vehicle and a London plane tree. The poor man never saw it coming and probably never even knew what happened. According to eyewitness and neighbor Mark Sarachik, there was blood gushing out of Chen's mouth. He looked like a blood fountain from some terrible horror movie. The EMTs did try to save him. They got him out of the car, gave him CPR, applied oxygen, but there was nothing they could do to fix his squashed brain. When they finally made it to the emergency room, doctors said the pressure put on Chen's brain was just too much for him to survive. 4. Assault in Alaska. An Alaska news anchor was arrested in October of 2020 for assaulting somebody in her station's parking lot. According to the report from the very station Maria Athens was working at, she was charged with assault, disorderly conduct, and criminal mischief. The news anchor was also banned from ever stepping foot on her station's property again. And yes, she lost her job. But the story is more complicated than that. Athens was in a bizarre relationship with the mayor of Anchorage, Ethan Berkowitz. They had been sending each other inappropriate text messages in 2016. In 2020, Athens came across some information that Berkowitz was allegedly posting inappropriate pictures of himself on a website for underage kids. She became enraged and threatened to expose him as a pervert to all of Alaska on the news. She even went so far as to post a photograph of Berkowitz's bare behind as proof of the allegations before she went live on the air. But before she ever had a chance to get on TV, she got into an argument with the station manager, who happened to be her boyfriend. They were driving around Anchorage when he kicked her out of his vehicle and said she was never allowed back at the station. But she went back to the television station anyway and beat the guy up in the parking garage. Then, when the police arrived to take her away, she hit a cop. We don't know how many of the allegations are true. We do know that shortly after the drama, Ethan Berkowitz resigned as the mayor of Anchorage. 3. Falling 3 stories. In February of 2022, a woman of just 25 had the worst motorcycle riding lesson in history. She tragically lost control of the motorcycle and drove straight off the top of a mall parking lot garage in Santa Clarita, California. She was being taught how to drive on the roof of the parking structure by a group of people who may or may not have been very good teachers. A spokesperson for the sheriff's office said one of two things happened. She either lost control of the motorcycle and threw herself over the edge, or she couldn't figure out how to stop. Whichever one it was, the end result was the same: She crashed into the low wall of the garage, went over the handlebars, and fell 3 stories to the hard ground below. Imagine the shock on the shoppers' faces outside Macy's when her body landed on the concrete below their feet. The unfortunate victim was treated at the scene and taken to the hospital, but there was nothing anyone could do to save her life. 2. Bad Memphis security guards. 2 security guards have been accused of assaulting a woman inside the very parking garage they were being paid to protect. It was October in 2021 when the woman and 2 friends parked in the First Parking Place garage in downtown Memphis. They left the garage and came back a little later to get their car. When they tried to get back into the garage, a security guard demanded $30 in cash. The woman refused to pay, saying she was being hustled, and everyone got into an argument. This was when the second security guard showed up pretending to be a police officer. He told the woman she would be arrested if she didn't leave, but when she asked to see his badge, he declined. He then became so angry that she wasn't being an easy victim and handing over the money that he slammed her on the ground and tried to put her in handcuffs. The first security guard has been identified as Lee Tops. The one pretending to be a cop is Matthew Jones. It was as the 2 men were struggling to handcuff the woman that a third security officer was called in for assistance, Michael Taylor. According to what the victim told police, rather than simply handcuff her, the men lifted up her dress and put their greasy paws all over her before she finally managed to break free and get into her friend's vehicle. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. Jones wouldn't let them leave. He stood in front of the car with his handgun pointed at them. But the victim and her friends were smart. They refused to leave the vehicle until Memphis police officers, actual cops, finally arrived. In the end, Jones was charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault and Taylor was charged with a misdemeanor assault. All they got was something equivalent to a 5-minute timeout. Tops never showed up for court and a warrant was issued for his arrest. 1. Tourism in California. A woman visiting the Bay Area of California as a tourist is probably never going back. In summer of 2021, the tourist, who refused to be identified publicly, parked her vehicle in the Bay Street Mall parking garage of Emeryville. When she returned to her car, she was attacked by a group of vicious men, carjacked, kicked, and punched. According to what she told ABC 7 News, it happened in the blink of an eye. Suddenly there were 2 men running at her, and in the next second she was on the ground and everything she owned was gone. She was left with 2 black eyes. This wasn't an isolated incident either. The Emeryville police said it was the 3rd robbery and carjacking in the parking garage since the end of spring, in over just 3 months. The perpetrators were never even caught. Thanks for watching. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen while just trying to park your car? Let us know in the comments below and be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye.